Good morning, everybody. My name is Scott Sternberg. I serve as the Executive Director of the Boulder Economic Council, and I want to welcome you to the third installment and the last installment of the 2021 Boulder Economic Summit, which we've entitled Our Path Forward. Just a little bit of history. Back in October, we met at the Embassy Suites during our keynote session, where we heard a mix of economic stories as well as the future of work and some of the work trends that we're facing post-pandemic. As a follow-up to that keynote session in October, we have scheduled two breakout sessions here online. The first session was completed and conducted in November, which was entitled Our Changing Workforce. My partner, Corinne Waldau, who's working this particular webinar behind the scenes, so thank you, Corinne, put together a great panel that discussed some of the changes and perspectives of what's going on with our workforce. That recording can be found through the newsletters that are distributed, and as participating in this session today, you should also have access to take a look at that session that was conducted in November. But today, we're talking about our changing workplace. And as we've talked through the various conversations around the economic indicators, the trends in our market, and really what has been a massive shift in how we work and where we work, we're going to be talking about our changing workplace. These are, of course, two very connected entities. Workers work in a place. And so we've tried to build a panel here that brings very different perspectives in terms of what a workplace environment will be. But before we get to that, we want to identify and thank our co-sponsors. We are very close partners with CU Boulder. We're very happy to be working in close collaboration with them, and also with Elevations Credit Union.
Good morning, how are you?
Good. At this point, we would like to welcome Dennis Paul. Dennis is the Vice President for Government Affairs and Strategic Partnerships at Elevations Credit Union, a longtime supporter and influencer here in the Boulder community, and certainly a supporter of the Boulder Chamber and the Boulder Economic Council. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dennis just to say hello and introduce the session this morning. So Dennis, on to you.
Good morning, Scott. Thank you for those kind words. It's such a treat, as always, to be on the BEC's program list. Elevations is a longtime supporter of the Boulder Economic Council, a standing strong member for the Chamber, and a advisory, strategy council member of Boulder Together. So we're bullish on the work you're doing. You and Corinne always put together an incredible program. This economic summit, which has spanned now a month or two, is no exception. So we feel very blessed at Elevations on behalf of our board of directors. We feel very blessed to be part of it and be able to support it. I was actually considering wearing my holiday pajamas that Deborah got me this year. They're little woodland animals, but then it occurred to me that I looked up expert panel in the dictionary, and there was a photograph of these four individuals. So we have a high caliber program this morning, and I'm sure that our audience will have some great takeaways. This is a timely issue. I know it's a moving target, so I'm anxious to hear from our panelists. I will share just briefly, Scott, as we end 2021, Elevations once again has seen a very successful year. We bank almost 1 in 2 households in Boulder and 1 in 3 in Boulder County, and our membership is the best. They're loyal, and we're able to serve the community well. I might just take a different tack this morning. In addition to the work that Elevations Credit Union does, we just did a retrospective on Elevations Foundation, which is the 501c3. It's the philanthropic arm of Elevations Credit Union that really does a lot of the heavy lifting in our community. And looking back, Elevations Foundation, I'm the chair of that organization. I just couldn't be more proud of our membership. In the last 10 years since its inception, the foundation has provided over $1 million in scholarships to graduating high school seniors that all of those, every scholarship that we provide has a needs-based component. Many of our scholarships are first-generation scholars, so it's a program that we're really proud of. In terms of disaster relief, as you're aware, Elevations Foundation mobilizes immediately in the wake of the situation in March of 2021. Our membership came to the table for a Victims Assistance Fund. Within 14 days, we were able to distribute nearly $800,000 to those families that lost loved ones. So that's a piece of Elevations that you might not know about. It's a pride point for us, but again, it's because of our community and because of our membership that we're able to support the community the way we do. But that said, I'm rambling, so let's get on to the meat of the program. Scott, thank you for the opportunity this morning, and really thank you for the critical work you're doing in our with our business community.
Well, Dennis, thank you so much for that. And, every time you talk, I learn something new. And, certainly that foundation, given the times that we live in and the changing attitudes and really challenges that we have within the workforce and the community, it's great to have Elevations, be able to stand up at a moment's notice and support, not just the community, but also our efforts here in economic development and connecting the business community. So thank you, Dennis, for that. We appreciate your support there. Well, let's get going here. I would like to just very briefly, as we get going, introduce as you said, our blue ribbon panel here, Dennis, for this morning. So yes, indeed, I agree with you wholeheartedly. This is a great group of folks. Just at the onset, we've tried to bring 4 folks together that come from very different business environments, all in the context of this idea of the workplace. Certainly, we've seen a lot of changes in the workplace. And what I would like to do is just briefly introduce each one in turn. And then as I introduce you, just tell us a little bit about your organization and what you do, just as context, because it does represent a very different perspective. So with that, I'll start with Becky. Becky Callan Gamble is the president of Dean Callan and Company, a local commercial real estate broker here in the Boulder community. So Becky, can you describe a little bit about Dean Callan and the work you do?
Certainly, Scott. Good morning, and thanks again for including us. Dean Callan & Company has been a commercial brokerage firm in Boulder since the early 60s, and we are Boulder County is really our wheelhouse. We provide landlord and tenant representation both on leasing as well as acquisitions and dispositions.
Great. Well, great to have you here this morning. Jose, I'm going to go next to you. I know you've had kind of an interesting morning already, so thank you for joining us. And I know that given your interesting morning, you will have to drop off a little earlier there. But I certainly want to introduce you. So, Jose is the chef and owner of both Black Belly and Santo here in Boulder. So. Jose, go ahead and tell us a little bit about your organizations and establishments.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks, Scott. Yeah, it's been an interesting morning. Yesterday, our head butcher had to call out due to a positive COVID result, and so I'm kind of filling in for our butcher. And then another one of our cooks, his roommate has COVID, so I told him he can't come in. It is sort of the sign of the times. In fact, it's really odd. Actually, sorry, let me rewind before I get into too many details. But my name is Jose Rosenberg, chef and owner of Black Belly and Santo here in Boulder. Santo is a Northern New Mexican restaurant. We're 4 years old, north side of town in the Ideal Marketplace. And Black Belly is a kind of a 4-headed monster. We're a high-end meat-forward restaurant, a catering company, a butcher shop, and a market. We're the only whole animal butcher shop in Boulder. We also are licensed to make and sell our own cured meats. So there's a lot of moving parts, and restaurants, as everyone knows, have been hit really hard with COVID. We were able to stay open the entire time. We pivoted many, many times over the course of the last year and a half. And we're sort of semi back to normal, but we have strange things happening all the time. This morning being one of them. And what I was alluding to is in the last 18 months, we've had maybe, I can count on one hand the number of people in our organization who have actually come down with COVID. We've been incredibly careful I've got my mask right here. I just took it off so you could see my pretty face, but we're all vaccinated 100%. It's one of our rules. We have a lot of strict protocols in place to keep everyone isolated and safe, and it's working. It just means that sometimes I have to put on my apron and do a few different jobs at the same time. So I'll try my best to stay on this call, but I may have to get up a few times. So I'll keep the camera on.
Well, thanks. Great to have you on board here, Hosea. And now I'll go to Dr. Everett Joseph here. And no, that's not his private aircraft in the background. Everett serves as the director of the National Center for Atmospheric Research, which has been an institution that is firmly planted here in the Boulder community and has been for, I would say, almost since the inception of the Boulder community. So Everett, welcome on board here today.
Yeah, I've been doing this for like 2 years now, almost 2 years now. You figure I'd get it right? Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Scott. Really, thank you for the opportunity to be here this morning. As you've said, NCAR has been a part of the fabric of the Boulder community since the 60s. We do basic research to really advance our system science in leadership and support of the active research community across the country and internationally. So we develop and provide facilities, tools, community models for the research community across the US to conduct basic research in climate, air quality hazards. We're active in the community with other federal labs, the academic institutions, the big academic institutions across the region. We're housed on a number of campuses across Boulder and in Cheyenne. And our most famous campus is really our iconic Mesa Lab campus in South Boulder. So again, really happy to be here and sort of be a part of this discussion, which is really important to us all.
Well, thanks. And, just to plug, as we do economic development, the federally funded laboratories here within Boulder have a economic impact that is over $1 billion. And that doesn't even count the 635 million or so that just recently came into CU from external funding into the university. So, an enormous engine that represents our research and intellectual base here. So great to have you here. It's a huge portion of our ethos here in Boulder. And last but certainly not least, I'd like to introduce TJ Matamore. In addition to being a practicing attorney, you also serve as the U.S. subsidiary president for VISLA, an organization that I certainly know and love. Great to have you on board, TJ.
Great to be here, Scott. Thank you, and good morning, everybody. I do represent VISLA, which is a global leader in environmental measurement. Our global headquarters are in Vantaa, Finland, but the US has always been a very strong market for us. We've been in the US since 1981 and moved our headquarters to the Front Range Boulder area in 2001 for a lot of the reasons that Everett just mentioned, that this is really a hub of atmospheric science and environmental measurement with the labs, with the universities, and we're delighted to be in this area. We just built a building here, which I will talk about a little bit later, which is really a reaffirmation of our commitment to the Boulder area. So pleasure to be on the panel. Thanks.
Great. Well, what we thought we would do in sort of our pre-conversation leading up to this panel is we have a fixed question for each of you all that hopefully will allow us to get the conversation going in a very active way, but also give you an opportunity to project your perspective from your day-to-day work life here. So with that, I'd like to start off with Becky. So Becky, you're obviously a commercial broker and a longstanding institution that is Dean Callan here within the community, and you see tenants come and go, and you see all kinds of properties that are being built or renovated throughout the years that you've been working in this community. So just a quick question here is how have you seen the conversations or the landscape changing as a result of the last 18 months? And I want to share a comment that you made. You said, what I'm going to say now was probably not correct 2 months ago and probably will not be correct 2 months from now. So it's a dynamic situation. So I'd love to have your perspective on that.
Yeah, and that might have even changed probably from a week ago to where we are today. And I think everybody to some degree feels it, you sense it, that this is just a fluid time where pivoting is part of everybody's business. So one thing I think, though, from your point from 18 months ago to now, we have seen, as we're working with companies to look for space, is the term conscious culture has come out of this. It used to be companies would start to think about their culture when they were looking for space and what kind of space and where they wanted to be and how that started to flow. Now that we've lived and experienced through work from home for a large majority of the companies, as they start to think about coming back, it's really all about conscious culture and what does that mean and what does that look like? And every company is very, very different. Those that we've seen stay and not really skip too much of a beat are those that I'll put in the life science category. And that is a wildly growing category right now, specifically to Colorado, specifically in this Boulder, Denver corridor. And in terms of activity, that's where we've seen the most demand for square footage for space now. There still has been companies that are, if their leases were up in 2021, likely they did a one-year renewal if they really wanted to keep that space. Some of them just said, you know what, we're not going to renew. We're going to wait to see what this looks like. Because I think the work from home went through also very many phases that a lot of you probably experienced. In the beginning, everybody was like, this is great. I can work in my pajamas. I can come and go. It's easier with my kids. This is a fabulous thing. But as time went on, all of a sudden, drawing the line between work from home and being home and how much everybody was really working and how that related to the productivity at the office, as well as it related to mental health, which then evolved this conscious culture. And so now everybody's like, I really would like to get back to work and in the office at least a few days a week. So the hybrid model, I think, is definitely here to stay for those companies that can do that. But again, what that looks like is it's just continuing to evolve. We thought we were on a really pretty good trajectory about 2 months ago. But now with yet another new strain, those companies that were like, we got to go, we got to look, we think we know what our hybrid model looks like, they've now said, we're going to pause, let's revisit this in the first quarter and see what things look like.
Well, Becky, thanks for that perspective. It's indeed, we're living in changing times, and thanks for mentioning the wet lab space. Just an opportunity to plug here. Recently, the Build Back Better Challenge grants finalists were announced. And just as a reference, the EDA put out an opportunity for $500,000 of seed funding for phase one for planning to somehow jumpstart the economy here in the United States. And of the 600 applicants that were put forward to these grants, Innosphere Venture here in Colorado was awarded one in conjunction with the 3 universities and a lot of local cities and organizations here in the state with the express purpose of targeting STEM development and acceleration specifically in the life sciences market. And you mentioned wet lab space, and that's certainly one of the areas of focus for that. So a lot of activity and alignment there. So thanks for bringing that up.
You know, one of the things, Scott, I also want to mention, because I don't want to cloud the real estate market in any stretch of the imagination, because the exact opposite really is occurring on the capital market side. The capital market side loves Colorado, loves Boulder, and we are seeing it doesn't even quite match up with the leasing velocity, but what the buyers are looking for, even on an institutional level, in this market, which we've just never seen before. And so they're recognizing the things that we know have been here all along behind Scott, the flat irons, and the intellectual capital that's really here as well.
Well, and I would actually say that the reason that many people are attracted to Boulder is because of the great restaurants that we have here. And so that's a great segue into Hosea. And I have to say, my God, with the social distancing and the occupancy limitations and the general reticence of people to dine out, you must be able to tell a worth of stories here around how you've had to pivot and how you've been working in the field. So can you give us some perspective of what it's like to run a restaurant in this day and age?
It's called a mute button. There we go. Absolutely. It's been a wild ride. No other way to phrase it other than just, I guess, dynamic. The restaurant industry has always been difficult. It's always known that it's a tough business to make a dollar in, and you're working with, you're depending on a lot of individuals to see your product through. High turnover rate, high depression rate, all of these problems existed prior to COVID. A lot of things were magnified when the pandemic struck us. However, as a chef in particular, but as a restaurant owner, we're trained to pivot from the beginning of doing these jobs. You constantly have to deal with variables that are out of your control, be it staffing or supply issues or weather. So it's kind of our job to think on our feet and pivot when we need to. We've been doing a lot of pivoting. It feels like we're whirling dervishes over the last year and a half. In fact, I was on a conference call yesterday with the Independent Restaurant Coalition, trying, they're part of this group that's trying to revitalize the restaurant recovery fund, get more money injected into restaurants that really need help. But from my perspective, it was all about thinking quickly and just doing what made the most sense in a pragmatic manner. So at the beginning of the pandemic, we actually had to let a lot of people go. We were effectively shut down. We couldn't have any occupancy. So it's really hard for a restaurant, especially like Black Belly, where I'm sitting. We're more fine dining. We do a lot of steaks. We do a lot of really intricate dishes, and these things don't necessarily translate to go food. So we had to kind of come up with some new items that we thought would work, packaged meals and different sort of take and bake things that people could take home. But one thing that we're blessed with at both of my restaurants is a lot of parking lot space, and so we were able to work with some of the programs that the city, the state, the federal government put in place, one being outdoor dining. We were able to pop up some tents and kind of open up outdoors and really get people eating in fresh air. So that made a big difference for us. We were also fortunate enough to be on board with a couple programs. One was Feed the Frontlines that was started by some venture capital people here in Boulder, that basically connected restaurants with frontline workers, hospital workers, fire department, police department. So we were getting paid to do packaged food for these institutions, and that was just enough income to kind of keep us going and keep the lights on. And then we connected with World Central Kitchen, which is a worldwide organization led by Chef Jose Andres. And they feed anyone in an emergency area, hurricanes, earthquakes, that kind of thing. But they also, during the beginning of the pandemic, were feeding frontline workers as well. And so we were actually feeding a lot of school children that were on lunch programs, and teachers and people that were affiliated with the public schools. So we kind of had these two kind of outlets for food. And then we slowly were able to get, like 25% capacity, then 50% capacity, and just rebuild. And that actually gave us a tremendous opportunity. It wasn't just us, but a lot of restaurants around the country to rethink our business model altogether. This was a huge phase shift in the way things work. And some of the things we had kind of danced around with over the years in the way we pay people and how we what kind of benefits we offer, we decided to kind of change our model, and we instituted what we call a fair wage and wellness fee that's applied to all of our bills. And that allows us to pay our back of house, our cooks, our dishwashers, our prep guys, fair wage, what we call a fair wage. And that kind of closed the gap between what servers and bartenders make and what kitchen people make. So everybody in our institutions, in our 2 restaurants and our catering company, everyone is guaranteed a much higher wage than they would have been prior to COVID. And so it's allowed us to offer, in addition to higher pay, more benefits. We have a lot of health insurance and wellness initiatives that we've incorporated into our business model. So we've got mental health counseling that's anonymous and free to every single employee. We offer paid time off, just like personal time, not necessarily sick time, but we do that in addition to sick time. You know, Becky talked about work culture, and we've really tried to use this as an opportunity to create a better work culture and only bring in people who really we felt aligned with our culture, and then really take care of those people. And so keeping attrition to a minimum is sort of our goal. We want to really develop the people that we have on our teams. And we've learned with our restaurants that sometimes less is more. We had to kind of shrink down our menus, shrink down our offerings, possibly our hours, but then we could really focus on quality and the people involved in those hours and those products that we made. So that worked out really well. Speaking on a personal level, it's been incredibly hard because the same week that the pandemic struck restaurants 18 months ago, my wife and I found out that our daughter had a ultra rare genetic disorder with no cure, no treatment. So we've been sort of parallel starting our own nonprofit foundation and trying to kind of basically save our daughter and also save our businesses. So it's been quite a ride. And the reason I bring that up is despite all of the hardships that restaurants and other businesses have felt over the last 18 months, we've had a lot of people come out of the woodworks and just offer any kind of support they can, not just for our restaurants, but for our daughter in particular and our foundation. And restaurants that were closed were offering auction items and chef experiences and that kind of thing. So it really made me feel good about the local restaurant community and the restaurant community at large across the country. And gave me a lot of hope and inspiration to keep going and to keep these restaurants going and feed the community. And overall, things have worked out pretty well. We were able to get some, government assistance through the PPP, which we got at both restaurants, and that allowed us to kind of come back full steam. And this last, 9 months have felt sort of semi-normal, other than wearing masks at work and making sure everyone's fully vaccinated and dealing with all the complications, including what happened this morning with my team, where I have a couple of people out. We're able to just kind of grind it out and make sure that everybody that is here is healthy and safe and happy to be here. And that's kind of what keeps us going.
Oh, great. Well, fantastic. And best wishes for your family there, Jose. Thanks for sharing that story.
Thank you.
Just a quick question that came in. Are you currently operating under any occupancy restrictions on either of your restaurants?
No, we're 100%. And we also have at least a Black Belly here. We've got a giant outdoor tent in addition to our indoor dining. But what we did, we don't have any restrictions, but out of just precaution, we sort of took out some tables. We just feel that people are more comfortable if they come into a dining room and it's not packed. So we have the tables spread further apart than we normally would. And we don't necessarily take as many reservations as we used to, but that gives people a feeling of comfort. And we added air filtration systems, and we have all these added kind of levels of safety that we put into our business. But we think it's paying off, and the people that do come in, at least the majority of them, seem to be comfortable and happy to be here. But yeah, no restrictions at the moment. Fingers crossed with Omicron that doesn't come shattering down on us again. Yeah.
Well, it sounds like you've taken a lot of, as Becky mentioned, conscious effort to create your culture there and then what you're about. So it's a great example. Thanks for sharing those stories. And as a bridge, living and working outside, Everett, you could argue that atmospheric sciences is all about being outside and in many ways. So, but you operate and manage, a government facility and a government research facility, to boot here, and a very different animal in many ways. And can you share some insights in terms of how the workplace has morphed from 18 months ago and from what was a very active research oriented and constructive collision type of environment to what it might be now. So we'd love to hear your perspective on where the government facilities are going and how they're being operated.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. So in a lot of ways, the challenges we face as a national center and as a research institution is really similar to the challenges that are faced by businesses in other sectors. We are privileged to have a more stable funding base relative to, for example, the service industry. So we have not faced the challenges that Jose so eloquently described, and certainly best wishes to him and his family. Maybe if I step back for a minute and sort of describe how we're approaching it, and I think how we're approaching it is very similar to our partners across the federal sector, academic sector, research institutions. We have two sort of related but separate approaches that are really focused on sort of time. We have an effort that's really focused on the short term, and then we have an effort that's sort of more focused on the long term. We are sort of engaged in the first effort, we're engaged in immediate term planning and management, in navigating the challenges as they present themselves. And so we have a group we call the Pandemic Management Response Team that we stood up to really help us navigate through the near term. But at the same time, we're also engaged in sort of a long-term strategic planning to what we call our reframe, envision, modernization, or we call this team our REM team. And I'll talk about our REM team throughout. Some organizations call this the post-COVID Innovation Task Force or the Future of Work Planning. Again, we simply just call it our REM team. So our PMRT, our Pandemic Response Team, is really thinking about the urgency of now. They're thinking about occupancy limits. We have a phased occupancy limit. We're in sort of what we call our yellow phase now, which caps our occupancy at roughly 50%. We're looking at mask protocols on site. And also we have to comply with, for example, the federal vaccine mandate. And so we've been managing our way to that. So our REM team is really supporting our staff and really meeting our mission in the midst of the crisis with, as Becky so eloquently puts it, with all the twists and turns that we have and we continue to experience. We made a decision that flexible work will be our mode of operation beyond the pandemic. So that REM initiative is really looking ahead in a strategic way to how we adapt our organization for that type of a work engagement. Given that this is inspired by the pandemic, REM is also using this experience in the pandemic to really capture strategies that are working well. So for example, adapting technology and norms of virtual meetings, but also identifying pain points that we're experiencing and that we haven't addressed. So what we're doing is really working to take this sort of data-driven, forward-thinking approach to really planning the future work at NCAR. We are as an academic institution that's very deliberative, have a deliberative culture. We have extensive staff and really broader community engagement, and being data-driven, looking at best practices. That's the type of decision-making really is our approach and our primary strategy to ensure that our future workplace is first and foremost really support our scientific research mission, because really that's key. Our scientific research mission, and really ultimately the process of discovery. We believe, and I think the literature and best practices suggest that organizations can't sort of successfully change their work arrangement without really making fundamental structural changes that support this type of work. You can't sort of superimpose flexible work in an organization that is really, in terms of its policies and its principles, structured for in-person work. So our REM effort is really focused about how to adapt our structures, our functions, and it's structured around some essential functions and essential areas like human resources, technology, facilities, community education and public outreach. What are the needs there? That's an important area for us. Equity and inclusion really cuts across all these essential areas, and certainly, the cohesion of the scientific community and the collaboration in the community, scientific community, is really a paramount area for us, and this also cuts across all other areas. So we form task teams around these areas, and we're doing extensive research and engagement to really, develop recommendations for leadership about how we go forward.
Oh, Everett, thanks so much for that. It's such a great perspective, and certainly, stewarding the institution that's been, here in Boulder as long as it has into the next 50 plus years. I think it's a great perspective. So thank you so much for sharing that. TJ, I want to move over to you. Vaisala has I would call it a very typical business footprint, if you will, where you operate a light manufacturing facility, but you also have a handful of offices for research and other supportive staff there on site. And, before the pandemic, you had plans to excavate and build a state-of-the-art building that was designed for congregation and collaboration. And then wham, the pandemic hit and the building opened. And so I'd love for you to share a little bit of your story and the journey that Vaisala has, and in the context that we also hear from manufacturing companies that there's this internal bifurcation of the, let's say, essential workers, or let's say the manufacturing workers, are those folks that have to be on site to produce the products, and those that can work remotely. So, I'd love to hear your perspective of what you faced over the last 18 months.
Sure. No, it's been quite a ride, and I feel very fortunate that we were able to get the building done and operational in the pandemic environment. And just quickly, before I get into some details there, I was actually inspired quite a bit by a visit to BlackBerry going to Josea's restaurant probably in maybe August or September of 2020, and they were really on the cutting edge of outdoor dining, separate tables, the people wearing masks while the waiter or waitress approached the table and things like that. And it really made me think about what we can do in this environment. And so that was, if I said BlackBerry, I meant Black Belly, of course, sorry about that. And we tried to adapt that to Vaisala. So yeah, here we do have a light manufacturing facility and a network operations center where we had to house employees here. Those employees couldn't work from home. And then we had another maybe 70 to 80 employees that could work from home. So we worked hard to maintain an environment of safety, of social distancing and the like, but that challenge continued to evolve through the time, pre-vaccine, post-vaccine, and the like. Our overall desire for this building never changed and still hasn't changed, that we wanted to build a building that was a dynamic place where people enjoyed coming, that spurred a sense of collaboration and imagination and motivation. And I think we've certainly done that. But at the same time, if the pandemic has taught us anything, it's that the health and safety of our employees and of our visitors is first and foremost. And as Becky mentioned, the hybrid model is here to stay. And we certainly have a long-term view of this building that we built here. We are hoping that we're here for 30, 40, 50 years. And I think that the ebb and flow of this pandemic and perhaps other pandemics in the future are unfortunately here to stay. But we've tried to maintain a balance. A lot of people really want to come to the office and want to get out of their home environment, and they are much more productive and happier being here. And then others are quite the opposite. And so we are trying to provide everything we can to allow our employees to excel, rely on the tools that we now take for granted, such as this Zoom call, but also have employees know that the building is always here. It's a place to meet with employees. It's a place to bring customers. As a federal contractor, we have gone to a full vaccination model, and I think somebody asked a question about what the regulations are. So as a federal contractor, we now are required to have all of our employees either be vaccinated, or if they have an approved exemption for medical or religious purposes, if they're coming to the office, they need to test within 72 hours. And I'm guessing that those regulations may shrink and it may go down to 24 hours in the future in order to provide that safe work environment for our employees. So it was certainly a challenge, and I don't know whether we would have received full approval to get this building built had we moved our timeline into the pandemic era. But since we were able to get it done, when we have this building, it serves as a place to be our headquarters, to inspire our employees, to inspire our visitors, but maintain that great work environment and a safe work environment where everybody feels that they can be here low risk. And I'm very proud of the fact that we do not know of anybody that contracted the virus at a Vaisala facility, especially this one here in the Louisville in the Colorado tech sector. So we're going to continue to maintain that diligence and hopefully provide a fantastic working environment for our employees now and in the future.
TJ, great stuff there. And just to plug it, it's just a beautiful looking building with a beautiful view of the Front Range, and it's just so stylistically done, and well done there. I've been there a couple of times, and it's it's such a jewel in that facility. So well done, with that project. You mentioned a word here, which is a segue into the next conversation. You mentioned this word productivity. And, I think, for a private business, certainly there are metrics on productivity, but can you comment? We've heard a lot about, oh, we went to the pandemic, everyone worked remotely and we're so much more productive. I'd love to get your view on how you measure productivity and whether that's been kind of a short-term tick up or down and where you see that going in the future.
Yeah, great question. I think it's really taught us at Vaisala, and I'm sure businesses and various industries all over the country and world, how to be more efficient, where, if somebody lives 45 minutes away from the office, that's an hour and a half that they can now spend working as opposed to commuting. Just again, providing the optimal work environment depending on what you do. And I'm in the legal group here. A lot of us can do what we do remotely, whereas salespeople obviously need to be in front of people as best they can, but they can do that online in addition to being in person. And you really can just tailor how you operate in this hybrid model, I think, in a very effective way. We've been very fortunate at Vaisala that we have done very well performance-wise through the pandemic, but a lot of that is because our expenses went way down because we weren't traveling nearly as much. And now that's, again, had a bit of an uptick. Now that's scaling down again. But I think it's really being willing to think outside of the box. And I think also by having a more open view of remote workers, it really opens yourself up to other markets in terms of who you hire. A great example of that, here in the Boulder area, it's a fairly expensive area. We're also in the Seattle, Washington area, which is very expensive. But if we want to hire, let's say, a software programmer and allow them to work remotely, we can hire from anywhere. If you're hiring from Oklahoma or Iowa or you name it, which is a less expensive area, we might be able to get great talent in markets that we wouldn't even have considered pre-pandemic. So it's, I think, forced innovation and thinking outside of the box, but in a way that if you take proper advantage of it, it can actually increase efficiency, increase the quality of your employee base. And if you really take the time and the effort to make them feel at home at your company, even if they are remote, it can really add to people's own personal job satisfaction and help your bottom line as well.
Great. Well, Everett, in the scientific community, productivity is sort of measured, I would say, a little bit differently, right? You can argue that it's production of papers and all of the figures of merit that academicians and research scientists use to promote their careers. So I'm kind of curious, in the last 18 months, has scientific productivity increased as you measure it, or certainly describe how your views on the productivity of your organization and maybe sort of the general trends across the research institutes nationally, and how you see that word productivity playing into the scientific community.
Yeah, no, productivity is something that we're looking at very carefully, thinking about how we define productivity, measure, and reward productivity. And yeah, I mean, Scott, your point is that our end product is our discovery and the research work that we do, but there's a value chain there of a diversity of work that really supports that effort. And so what we're doing is we're looking at each category of work that really contributes to our institutional productivity. Very similar to TJ's, what TJ share, we are looking at our key performance industries that we have in place and how these can and should adapt to a hybrid work environment. So we are discussing development of really more customized productivity standards, if you will, from a team to team basis. It's sort of no longer how much time, for example, you spend in front of a workstation, but it's really it's more than measuring time spent or volume of work. And what we want to do is really value the impact and the contribution of that work to the organization, and again, ultimately to the to advancing science. I think, again, we've had experience that's similar to other organizations. One of the things that we've seen is a tremendous increase in the access to science from the virtual environment that we're operating in. Workshops that used to have attendance in the order of 100 participants are now having attendance in the order of thousands of participants from all across the world. And certainly that's, I think that's one aspect of productivity, if you will, on our science. But there are other aspects. The loss of being in this sort of in-person environment and the serendipity that's associated with that, in terms of research productivity, that's been impacted. And it's really hard to measure, but that's sort of what we're experiencing at this point.
It's fantastic. I think back in the early phases, you and I had a conversation about, the concerns of the quality of science that is being generated due to the lack of personal interactions and collaborations. And we sort of talked about this idea that it's possibly going the other way because the collaboration tools that we now are most familiar with are engaging a much broader and more diverse audience to bring in there. So you could argue that you're getting perspectives from a greater number of backgrounds and experiences and disciplines all interacting, whereas in a discipline-centric conference, you probably would just get the same folks talking to everybody that they talked to last year. So it's a wonderful horizon here for new creativity tools. Well, Jose, we've sort of seen a little window into your morning here as you've kind of come in and out of the call, and you certainly are trying to manage your productivity here this morning, as you mentioned here. So, you know, in the hospitality restaurant sector, there's certainly figures of merit that are used to measure productivity. But can you kind of comment on how you are looking at, you know, your figures of merit and how productive, more productive or less productive you have been due to some of the changes that you mentioned earlier?
Yeah, sure. You know, I think it kind of goes without saying that we can't work remotely. There are no alternatives to being in a restaurant because we're cooking food and we're serving people that come in for that food. So that's not an option for us. But what we've learned, especially at Santo, my other restaurants, we had to significantly downsize our offerings. Our menu got a lot smaller. We pivoted for lunch to a counter service model rather than a full service model. And we do breakfast burritos in both restaurants, which are incredibly popular. Like there's a line of about 20 people next door at the market at Black Belly waiting for the breakfast burrito. And what we learned was this counter service, quick service model for us works great because people don't mind. And in fact, a lot of customers would prefer to not be in an indoor environment right now as much as possible. So for breakfast and lunch, they come in, they grab their food, they go. The menu got a lot smaller. Everything's packaged to go. We're using 100% compostable and recyclable materials, which something I strongly believe in, but I know a lot of our customers appreciate as well. But to answer your question, we've learned how to be a lot more efficient. And at dinner at Santo, we made the menu a lot smaller, mainly because we were forced to do this with a smaller staff. So we just can't have everything all the time. So we honed in on the most popular items, the things that people enjoy the most, that kind of define what we are. And we're doing sales that are pretty close to what they were back in 2019 before the pandemic hit. And we're doing better margins on those items. So we're actually in you know, one perspective, we're actually doing better. You know, we're actually doing better with less. And so our food costs have gone down, our labor costs have gone down, the employee retention rate is much, much better. So in at least by some measures, you know, we're actually working much smarter now and doing more with less and really making sure we don't overtax the people that are here. We would love to have more items. We have this wood burning oven in Santo that it hasn't seen a single flame in it in almost 2 years now. You know, it's a shame because it's such a beautiful thing and it's this hearth and we can cook these amazing dishes out of it. But without 14 full-time shifts, it's lunch and dinner that would have to be cooked out of that thing. So it's 2 people a day. We don't need to fill those shifts. We don't have to spend the labor on it, and we don't have to buy the firewood. And again, I want to get back to having more, but we've really figured out how to work efficiently. And this kind of grab and go situation for the early hours of the day have proved to be incredibly profitable for us. And it allows us to kind of do more at dinner and have a little bit more capital to work with to improve the building. And we're actually expanding right now at Black Belly. We took over the space next door to us. Over the years, we started with one space and we had a catering company, a butcher shop, and a restaurant all in one little area. And then about 1.5 years after opening Black Belly, we opened up next door, which is the wall behind me, which is where our butcher shop and market is. And we're still kind of having these growing pains. So Quiznos was next door to that. So we're taking over that space and we're going to expand our butcher and market and build another private dining room so we can kind of, again, my focus has very much been on getting people in the building, but keeping them separated. So if we have multiple dining spaces and outdoor and indoor, but doors that separate places and different air circulation systems, it really makes it a safer environment, not just for our guests, but also for my employees. We want to make sure that they don't get sick, that they don't have to go home for a long period of time. And if someone does get sick, it's just one person. Case in point today, we have these really good programs for isolating and making sure that anyone was in contact is immediately traced. And you know, I'm on a tangent now, but basically, I feel really confident about what we've been able to do and be thinking on our feet. And it's worked out so well that I have the belief that our growth is a good move right now, and we have an opportunity to get bigger and do it smartly and slowly, but continue to grow, and that will keep us kind of current and modern, but also give more opportunities to the really amazing employees that I have now and give them growth opportunities. Because if I don't do that, the highest up people will probably go somewhere else if I don't give them new opportunities. So it's, like I said, it's working out. It has not been easy, but we've been able to figure it out. And the people that are here that have been on board are very much excited about the opportunities that we're looking at.
Fantastic. Becky, I want to move on to you. And I, have a couple questions. It's kind of the same question, but, from two different perspectives that you bring. Obviously you run an organization and, you have turnover and you measure productivity in a certain way. So I would love to sort of hear how, your specific organization has measured and then, try to understand the productivity. I can imagine a lot of tenants are looking to change their space and come to you with all kinds of requests and how you're managing that in real time. But also, if you could bring a perspective, you also manage a number of facilities or in facilities that are strictly office environments. And, we see vacancy rates split up by flex space and retail space and office space. And one of the concerns is that there's a lot of empty office space here due to some of these productivity conversations. So if you can kind of bring your business perspective and then maybe a broader perspective of the office space environment here in Boulder, that would be great.
Sure. So personally from our business, from the brokerage world, obviously productivity used to be measured by a lot of metrics in your revenue and deals getting done. And so the last 18 months, there just hasn't been a lot, particularly the last 6 months have certainly picked up, but there was a year where you couldn't go show space. You couldn't, everybody was a little bit paralyzed. And so internally, what we really changed is productivity to Dean Callan and Company became our ability to help our clients. And it was shorter term solutions. How can we help them best cut their revenue or get them to a situation that they were going to be able, A, to survive, and B, be prepared to the next step when whatever that looks like. And so I think for us, it was more, how can we help? It wasn't a monetary productivity. It was more, hey, we're here. We know what's out there. How can we help? And I think long-term, that just from a relationship perspective, that has served us very well. I think, there's office spaces that are empty, but then there are office spaces that are empty and they're still paying rent. And so I think people are driving around town and seeing a lot of empty parking spaces and just assumed that they're not necessarily paying rent, which isn't the case anymore, really. But what we are seeing, as I alluded to in the beginning, is some of these companies that just don't know, they're looking for subleases, or they're looking for just these short-term, get us 6 more months or get us 12 more months so we can understand a little bit better what things are going to look like for us going forward. So in terms of vacancy, yes, the vacancy rate has, historically, when you look at office or flex space, again, over a decade or 2 decades, it's a very strong market. I mean, you're gonna see a 10% vacancy number, give or take. But that reflects a very strong market, which what Boulder really is. The warehouse side is incredibly strong. And so there's, maybe 1 to 2% of a vacancy there. And that, again, is a nature of what some of these, so much of the online commerce is doing and the need for warehouse. So what that looks like going forward, I can't really tell you on the office space. I can tell you that companies do want an office space. So that's never going to go away. We're always going to have that. But what that means in terms of square footage, we don't know yet. We just, because every company is a little bit different. And I go back to this in the beginning, their social culture is really what's driving what their space is going to look like going forward. And for some companies, it's bigger collaboration space. And when people do go into the office, they want that time to connect with their other office teammates or people that they just don't normally do work with, but they're all under the same umbrella of one company.
Well, to that point, TJ, I want to sort of branch off to what Becky said earlier, this idea of conscious culture and, creating these environments. How are the Vaisala employees taking some of the changes that have been implemented, either, statutes or just, sort of company culture issues? Are you hearing, or what are you hearing from the employee base in terms of how they're either resonating or not resonating with some of the workplace changes that are here?
Yeah, so we went, as you know, Scott, from a very office-based environment where everybody had separate offices and you couldn't really see the way other people were working, and it really didn't foster collaboration and just organic type of interaction between employees and groups, to a much more open environment, workstations. And we designed the building specifically that everybody in workstations have great natural light, great views of the outside, and it was all to create that culture. But there was a lot of nervousness and apprehension, and some people going from an office environment to a workstation environment are nervous. It's going to be too loud. I'm not going to be able to get my work done. And because of the pandemic, we really didn't get the time period of adjustment that we thought we would, that everybody would move in, there'd be maybe 6 to 8 weeks where people were getting used to it, and then they'd find their flow, and things would work the way we hoped and anticipated it would. That really hasn't happened as much because we're still, in any given day, only have maybe 20 to 50% of our workforce in the office. So that adjustment period didn't work out the way we planned it. But for those that have been here, the overall reaction, I think, has been quite positive. And I actually just have 2 new team members on my team, and they're really enjoying the workstation environment. And we have a separate office kind of earmarked for my team. And they're like, oh, I don't think we really need that. I'd rather be out in the open and kind of be where the action is. And that's the attitude that I was hoping most people will have. And a lot of people have gravitated towards that. And I think it's just a more exciting area, and it's motivating when you see salespeople on the phone, when you see our scientists hard at work at something, you really get a sense of the various components that makes Vaisala the company that it is. And I think it's a very motivating dynamic when you have that. So there are still some that are, somewhat vocally expressing the fact that they'd rather be in an office than be in a workstation. But even though the period of transition has been a lot longer than we anticipated, the people that are coming to the office every day are giving very positive feedback, and that spirit of collaboration, innovation, imagination, which Becky just talked about as well, is beginning to take hold. And I think, again, with the long-term view that we have, we're hoping that at some point we'll be at more like 70 to 80% capacity. I don't know if we'll ever get to 100, but hopefully it will foster that environment that we had anticipated. And overall, I think it's happening, but just over a much longer transition period than we had planned on originally.
That's great perspective. Thanks for that. Everett, I want to pivot a little bit. So you are the director of NCAR, but NCAR sits under the University Corporation for Atmospheric Research, which engages with over 100 universities here in the United States. And when you talk about conscious culture, university campuses are, by definition, their own little cultural centers, scope buffs, right? And all of the wonderful things that a university campus has. I'm just curious in your conversations and as NCAR reaches out to, just hundreds of universities, you certainly here in the United States and across the globe, do you see any consistencies or comparisons and contrasts in terms of how universities are sort of moving forward in trying to maintain or develop their conscious cultures?
Yeah, Scott, I think that's a really good question. I'll try to do my best. As you know, you are on the UCAR board, so that's one way in which we interface with the university community. We also have our membership activities, our membership meeting. That's another way we engage with the university community. If you compare that to what we're doing, well, first of all, when you look at universities, they have a different business model, right? I think they have had to adapt really quickly back to sort of an in-person environment. As TJ mentioned, we're very similar to Vicella in that we have a 50% occupancy cap, but at any given day, we're seeing probably about 20% or so. Universities, on the other hand, they have dorms that they need to finance. They have tuitions. Parents are really not supportive of paying full tuition, but having their kids go to school virtually. So universities are back, and they had to pivot and had to be back by and large. I would say they're hybrid, but their occupancy and their in-person activities are much higher than what we are experiencing. However, in sort of thinking about the future, what we hear when we engage in the university community, we heard that in our recent meetings with members for that community in the fall. We heard that what I described earlier about our thinking, our forward thinking, we hear that kind of thinking is sort of ahead of where they are right now. And maybe it's because, and I don't really have a good answer here, maybe it's because they're really focused on the now, given their business model. And so what we heard from the representatives that came to Bold that virtually were engaged in our meetings virtually is that this sort of really deep thinking that we're doing and deep research that we're doing of how and long-term thinking that we're doing of how to adapt our organization to the hybrid environment, at least in the campuses that we communicate with, they're not per se engaged in that level of thinking. And so again, it's sort of, I think as Becky pointed out, it's also sort of a wait and see what happens in some aspects of that.
Well, as we kind of move into the waning minutes of this panel discussion, I'd like to ask a question of all of you. Hosea, you kind of gave us a little bit of a view of how you're been forward thinking in your long-term strategy and how you've kind of recalibrated your business towards the future. But let's say, I don't know, pick a time frame, the next year, 2 years, or in the near-term future, where do you see your businesses evolved, and how different would they be from when you initially conceived the concept of your restaurants there?
I think it's slow and steady wins the race. That's always kind of been my driving philosophy. We don't try to jump on trends. We don't try to overdo it. It's all about developing the team and making sure that we have the resources to grow slowly. As I mentioned, we're opening up next door. This Black Belly started as a very, very small boutique catering company. It was basically me and my truck and a couple buddies of mine making food for people. And over the years, we've just kind of folded in, I think of it as a big recipe, right? We're just adding new ingredients as we go. And to me, I'm very excited about where we're at. I'm very pleased and proud that I feel like, knock on wood, that we're making it through the pandemic. I don't have a crystal ball, but I feel confident that we have the right people and enough traction to move forward and just to keep growing. It has not been easy. And one thing I ask of the public and anyone you talk to, you can share this, just be patient with restaurants. A lot of them are short-staffed. A lot of them are just barely hanging on, not a lot of money in the bank, and they need every sale to kind of keep the lights on for one more day. But the hardest part is the staffing. We have been short staffed for a year and a half. We're close to being, kind of full what we need, but we're never quite there. And there are days like today where we're just kind of a little short. And those are the days where people come in and they don't have any patience. And especially at dinner, our hosts, oftentimes they're young college students. They don't have a lot of experience dealing with the public, and they're the ones that end up getting the wrath, either with a mask mandate or just kind of limitations on how many seats we can offer each night. And people really like to take it out on the host or the person who answers the phone. And one thing that will give us continued success, and a lot of restaurants out there continued success, is just patience and kindness from the public. We're a public facing business. This is about as public as it gets, as being restaurants where you're having people in your space for 2 hours or more at a time. We just need everyone to understand that this certainly isn't over, and we can't do everything for everyone every day, but we will do our best.
Sounds great. That's great advice, and I certainly appreciate that. I want to go from let's say a local restaurant to maybe a global perspective, and TJ, I'm going to put you a little bit on the spot here. Vaisala is a global organization, and so you have a view of what certainly your parent company corporate office is doing in Finland, but also have interactions around the world. I'd just like to hear your perspective on, do you think the U.S. philosophy in terms of how we're approaching workforce and workplace is consistent with what's going around on the globe, or are there any kind of stark differences that you see internationally from what we're doing here in the United States?
No, good question. I think it is fairly consistent, and what I've been surprised to see in countries like Finland and other places that we operate is there is also the small minority of people that aren't playing ball with the vaccines and doing what needs to be done. We've had a little bit of that here at Vaisala and in the US. But by and large, people are buying in, and they understand trying to maintain a very safe work environment. I think one of the constant themes with this hybrid model and creative culture that we keep talking about is flexibility and adaptability. And I think that we are seeing that around the world, that we know that there's going to be certain times where you can get to the office, you don't have to wear a mask. Then there's going to be times that you can get to the office, but you have to wear a mask. And there'll be times you can't go to the office at all. And just being able to adapt that way is critical for survival. And right now in Finland, for example, the trend is staying away from the office again. It's the numbers there are going up significantly. And so most non-essential personnel, in terms of who can operate in a remote environment, are being encouraged to work in that remote environment again. And if we have to do that here in the States, we will do that. And I think we're properly equipped now to deal with those fluctuations, and but also maintain as safe a working environment as we possibly can for those people that have to work at the office that can't do their job otherwise. So it's been relatively consistent, as I've seen throughout the international offices of Vaisala. And I think if we maintain that attitude of flexibility and doing the best we can as circumstances dictate over the next month, year, 5 years, 10 years, that's the key to survival and to thrive.
Great. Well, Becky, I'm going to do another microscopic question, and so a similar question here. You mentioned that you have interactions with a lot of folks and a lot of capital flowing into the Boulder area. Just from your view, can you comment on how well Boulder is doing, if you will, to some of the other maybe municipalities that I know you also operate in, and maybe some perspective that some folks that you talk to from maybe around the United States are looking to Boulder, and how well we're doing as a city when it comes to economic recovery and vitality?
think historically, when you look at Boulder, everybody kind of makes fun sometimes of the Boulder bubble. But what creates that Boulder bubble, two panelists are kind of on here today. We have the security net of a huge per capita government employee base, which when economies ebb and flow, having that government stabilization certainly helps. The university also falling underneath that category. Then you take Boulder's diversification between biotech and outdoor industry and the food industry and cannabis industry. I mean, we're in a very, very diverse economic engine. And again, when economies have a tendency to go up and down, I think the more diverse that you can be, the drop won't be nearly as significant. So as a result, Boulder stays always a little bit ahead. If you're looking at the country, Boulder stays always a little bit ahead of everybody in the state. And Colorado has a tendency to stay a little bit ahead of everybody within the country. So right now, I think as weird as the times kind of are and how we're trying to adjust really how that goes, Boulder still is a very thriving city and community. I think it's a direct correlation to the entrepreneurial spirit and the community of the people that are here. And I don't anticipate, I think we're very lucky that we all get to get up and go and do work here in Boulder. And so I think that kind of the projecting out, I think Boulder's in really, really great shape along with the state of Colorado.
That's a great perspective. You know, I sit in a privileged position because I think I spoke with with all of you about 18 months ago or whenever things were becoming, very acute for all of us. And, I'm just so impressed with how the conversation has progressed, certainly with you all, but certainly within the community, from the point of, oh my God, what am I going to do tomorrow? What's going on? Which was certainly the case when the pandemic started, to what I've heard today, which is this focus on your value creation and the true secret sauce that you have. Look after the short term and react as positive as quickly as you need to, always with an eye on the long term. And I think I've sort of heard that in all of your conversations. And I'm just, like I said, impressed with how the conversation has evolved from what was a crisis situation when we first engaged so many months ago and as we entered this pandemic. So, in the spirit of closing, I'd just like to ask if folks would like to end with any parting words here in the next couple of minutes here. And, Everett, I'll give you a first shot here. If there's anything that you want to leave as an inspiring message or a take-home message from your experience on the changing workplace that you've seen.
Yeah, I don't know if inspiring is a tall order, but certainly it's been, I've enjoyed being a part of this conversation and just really hearing about how other businesses, other industries have responded, their experiences and how they have responded, because it's instructive to us as well, not to be narrowly focused, to be more open-minded. I think part of the theme here is sort of being flexible, being adaptive. And what I would say is what I've experienced is just, it's sort of, a cliche, but really our teams have been fantastic. Our staff has been fantastic. And how our success has really been attributed to their ability to do the things that we've talked about this morning, to really be adaptive, to be productive, to be committed, to care about each other. That's one of the things I saw throughout this experience, is that just to care and support our staff have engaged with each other. And that's really our success. We're really privileged we feel privileged to lead a very talented, productive, and caring team of people And we just try to do our best as leaders to stay ahead and navigate the challenges that we're experiencing and to look over the horizon. So I'll stop there. And again, just really thanks for the opportunity to be a part of this panel this morning.
Okay, well, thank you so much there, Everett. People matter, that's for sure. And Hosea, you certainly suggested that with, what you're doing there. So any parting thoughts for us today? And again, thank you for giving us a glimpse into what an operative restaurant in the breakfast hours there. And I'm really hungry for a burrito when you mentioned it too. So I've had many of those in my past, and I'd love to have one this morning. So thanks for joining us here.
Sure. No, it's my pleasure. It's an honor to be a part of this panel. Thanks for having me. Sorry if I've been a little distracted. All I've had is coffee today, so I'm talking a little faster than normal as well. But next time we all meet, hopefully we can do it in person. I can bring burritos for all of you guys.
We always welcome that. We always welcome food at the BTC.
It's just hard to feed. It's hard to feed you virtually. As I mentioned, this is not a business we can do very well from home. But I touched on this already, but for me, for my industry, and I think a lot of industries like what I do in service and retail, it's just cultivating your staff. We've all kind of touched on this. You can do a lot with fewer people if you really develop the people that you have. And so for me, it's incredibly important. My driving force has been taking care of the people that are here and making sure that they're committed and they share the vision, and then we'll be successful. And then the other thing is just for the public, as I mentioned before, be patient with restaurants and support small independent restaurants in particular. This is going to be another tough winter for a lot of small businesses. One great way to help, and this is not just for restaurants, but again, all small retail, mom and pop kind of shops, is buy gift cards. Our gift cards never, unless our business goes under, they will always be worth the amount that you bought them for. And it's a great gift. And it's a great way to support restaurants because we get the revenue now. And, it kind of keeps places afloat, especially during slower periods. So that's a way usually my short answer for people when they ask how they can help is just buy somebody a gift card to your favorite restaurant. And that really goes a long way. So again, thank you guys for having me as a part of this. And it's an honor to be in this group.
Well, thanks so much for joining us and taking time out of what is clearly a busy morning for you. So appreciate the time allotment. TJ, it's always great to talk to you. I know that the high tech company publicly traded space is very, very different here. So any thoughts that you'd like to leave us with in terms of how we can either help or support or what you're feeling here?
Well, I think if this has taught us anything, it's just how blessed we are, and Everett used the word privileged we are to be based here in Boulder County. I've done quite a bit of traveling, actually heading down to our Tucson office this afternoon, been up in Wyoming and other places, and the attitude about the pandemic, about wearing masks, about vaccines and the like in other areas of the country is very different than it is here in Boulder County. And even though a lot of our employees rolled their eyes a bit when the mask mandate was reinstituted a number of months ago, I was actually very proud of the fact that Boulder County made that decision. It was a very pro-health, pro-employee decision to do that in the face of potential backlash that people are just sick of having to wear masks all the time. But it really reflects what Boulder County is all about, that it's progressive, that it's health and safety first. We all look forward to the day that we don't have to do that. But I think the underlying message was a very strong and positive one. We made the decision back in right around the turn of the century to move here in 2001. And all the time we are reminded of why it's so great to be here in Boulder County, be here in the Front Range, be around the labs and the universities and the people around here. But it's really, again, it's the forward thinking, it's the intelligence, it's the attitude of the people in Boulder County, the leaders, the government officials that makes this such a fantastic place for business. And the fact that we built a building here that should stand for 30, 40, 50 years is a real testament to our confidence that we're in the right place.
Great. I couldn't have said that better. Thanks so much, TJ, for being here this morning. And Becky, I'm going to end with you. And, before that, I just wanted to highlight the fact, to the community that's listening here that, you've been such a guiding force for us here at the Boulder Economic Council and continue to be so as serving into next year on the executive committee here for the BEC. So I know, speaking for Corinne and myself and everyone here at the Chamber, we very much appreciate your guidance and the support that you give our organization, such that we can provide programming like this as a benefit to our overall community. So thank you so much for the work you do. And with that, I'll give you the last word, as is often said.
Well, it certainly is my pleasure. And I think I can't emphasize enough the importance of the work you do, Corinne, and the BEC. And again, it's just, I'm going to take kind of everybody's little snippets at the end, but we are so lucky and privileged to go to work in a place like Boulder, Colorado. And so the inspiring words really are, go support people like Hosea and small businesses and small restaurants, because that has always been and always will be the little engine that drives Boulder and makes it so attractive for the larger companies to come and thrive here as well. But again, it's what you guys do and what everybody here does is super important. And it's an honor and it's a privilege. And again, do your best to support local, and everybody have a safe and happy holiday.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you to all of our panelists. And, on behalf of the Boulder Economic Council and the Boulder Chamber, thank you so much for this engaging conversation. This does represent the end of our 2021 Economic Summit, Our Path Forward programming. I think it ended on such a high note that I've been frantically taking notes, and I've appreciated all of your perspectives. What we try to do here at the BEC and the Chamber is to bring in diverse backgrounds and experiences and bring this conversation together under our general purpose and mission of convening. And I think that was on example today, this morning. I just want to end by saying thank you to Elevations Credit Union and to CU Boulder for their ongoing support and their engagement in the business community. It's such a jewel to have organizations that are committed to community service and outreach, such as the university and the credit unions and all of our other sponsors and investors that we have here at the BEC. So with that, I'm going to close down the session with a heartfelt thank you to all of you. Have a safe and happy holiday season, and we'll hopefully see you on the turn of the year. So enjoy yourselves and get a little of that mental R&R that we talk about. So thank you all so much.